Hello friends, welcome back to Young Wisdom. As mentioned in the previous video, today in this video I'll talk about free will, why it is reasonable to believe in free will, and why it is intelligible to believe in the existence of free will. So how are human beings free? And how are human beings free in making decisions and making choices? So in this video, we'll try to cover the concept of free will. If you have watched the previous video which I've made and which I've entitled it as Is Free Will an Illusion? So in the previous video, when I went through the comment section, there were interesting questions which I would really love to answer, um, and they were very serious and very genuine questions which are worth answering, which are worth trying to answer.
Hey, here's a very quick announcement. As we are very close to hitting our first 1000 subscribers, I want to hear from you on what I can do to show that I really care for my subscribers. Tell me what you think. Go live, or make a video on Q&A, or giveaway. Please comment down below.
If we are saying that free will does exist, then we should also have genuine arguments for the existence of free will. Because free will, concepts like free will or determinism, cannot be simply justified by our common sense, right? And when we say, then how does free will exist? Then generally all of our answers would be common sense. Because we know that human beings are not automatons, human beings are not robots, human beings are not controlled by external forces, or human beings are not controlled by any other person or any other objects, and therefore human beings are free. We make choice, and therefore free will exists. That would be something unintelligible to explain free will that way, right? That is illogical. And therefore, when we argue on any particular concepts and big philosophical concepts like free will, determinism, there should be logical consistency in our arguments. There should be enough evidences. There should be enough studies from different perspectives. And therefore, we'll try to break down and try to understand all the concepts of self. And then we'll move on to understanding what free will actually is. So when it comes to understanding self, first comes always physiological aspects or biological aspect of self. When we look into the biological aspect of self, self is the physical presence that we have. Self is the entirety of the body. So everything about self is physical. So that is biological or physiological aspect of self. So coming to psychological aspect of self, human beings are not just physical beings, right? We are psychological beings. So how are we psychological? Right? How can we consider that human beings are psychological beings? Psychological aspect of self consists of emotion, desire, our cognition, the way we think, the way we ascribe things, the way we perceive things. Human beings are defined psychologically, and we are all different in our own ways. And therefore, that is the whole idea of psychological aspect of self, right? Now coming to subjective aspect of self. When we ask what is self, then you have your own answer on what self is. If you ask me what is self according to me self is a deciding being. Subjectively, everybody has different understanding of self because subjectivity can only remain to the person. Unless I open your mind and read your mind, it can never be understood. And therefore, subjective concept of self, aspect of self, is the way you think about yourself, the way you understand yourself, the way you monitor yourself. That is self, subjective aspect of self. Now coming to philosophical aspect of self, philosophical aspects of self leaps over all these aspects of self. Philosophical aspect of self is such important that human beings self are not just a deciding being, but moral driven, value driven, and human beings have meanings. Human beings have purpose. So when we study some deep philosophical concepts like teleological understandings like the purpose of life, right? Values, meanings. And when we ask all these questions, so self consists of all these meanings, values, ideas, and then purpose. So self comprises of all these elements. And so that is philosophical aspect of self. Now quickly coming to the concept of understanding free will. What actually is free will? Free will simply is that an individual has the ability to make choice. We have potential of making decision, making choices to distinguish between things, and then to have a freedom to make choice and to decide. So that is free will, right? So if you have really understood the idea or the concept of determinism arguments are so strong because human beings are biologically determined in some ways, psychologically determined, environmentally determined. So what is not determined? Where does free will lies? Free will exists. So that is the great question against the existence of free will. Now we can talk about laws of logic. Because if things has to be understood scientifically, then we cannot omit the idea of laws of logic. So there are three major laws of logic. The first logic is identity. The law of identity. So the law of identity makes us understand that things has to be identical. I cannot be Lingcholi today and then become a different person tomorrow. I cannot be me today and become somebody tomorrow, right? That is not identical. And therefore, who am I today also should be who am I tomorrow? Who will I be tomorrow? If I am a human being, I should also be a breathing and decisive being like everybody. And if I'm not, then it goes against the law of logic. So that's the first law. Second law of logic is non-contradiction. Things should not be contradictory. I cannot say that eating meat is good and bad at the same time. When I say good, it means it is good. And when I say bad at the same time, then it means my concepts or my ideas or my words contradicts with my own idea, right? My idea contradicts. And therefore, words that we use, things that we say, the concepts, and then the nature of reality should be non-contradictory. That is the second law. Third laws of logic would make us understand about omission of between, right? Omitting the between. So if it is good, then it should be good. If it is bad, then it should be bad. There shouldn't be nothing in between. So that is the third law of logic. The laws of logic make sure that everything is governed. Everything about life and everything about the nature of life is governed by these these laws of logic. So that's about the laws of logic. But when we are talking about a breathing and deciding and living beings like you and I, our life runs beyond the laws of logic. We are not just logical beings, right? There are things that logic cannot understand. There are things that logic cannot explain. There are things beyond logic. So why do we say things are illogical? Right? Why do we say things are illogical? Because it does not meet the standard of logic. And therefore, when it does not meet the standard of logic, then it becomes illogical. But when it goes beyond logic, then what do we say? That is not illogical, but that is beyond logic. So life exceeds the laws of logic. So life is not simply governed by the laws of logic. So that is the first argument in defense of free will. Even in one branch of physics called quantum mechanics, so I don't know much about quantum mechanics, or I don't know much about physics, but the small thing that I know about quantum mechanics is it is the study of behavior of matters and energy, right? So it breaks down into atomic particles or subatomic particles. The argument is called quantum mechanics unpredictability. So how matter changes and how particle changes its position and its shapes. All these are unpredictable. So even when it comes to quantum mechanics, things are unpredictable. So likewise, our life, there is unpredictability of life. Even though doctors can measure to what extent your life would live or how long your life might live or sustain, but we don't exactly know what would happen and when would we die. right? When will we die? So there are those unpredictability, or there is those uncertainty that surrounds our life. And when uncertainty surrounds our life, it kicks away the idea of determinism. When we talk about determinism, if we keep trying to understand determinism and go deeper into the understanding the concepts of determinism, it leads nowhere but falls into very scientific reductionist idea, that it falls down and then it removes all the meanings of life, it removes all the purpose of life, it removes all the values of life, but things has to be measurable, things have to be observable. So determinism ends somewhere there. So that is like all Darwinist idea of life, that life is random, life has no purpose. But one thing, when you read the book The Origin of the Species by Charles Darwin, when you read his book, there is an idea called sexual selection. The idea of sexual selection of Darwin very much differs from the idea of neo-Darwinist ideas like Richard Dawkins' idea of genes and so on and so forth. In sexual selection, I'll just use an example of peacock or birds. Female birds come and then look for male birds. Male bird that looks the most vibrant and attractive. Male birds that sings better. That is the idea of sexual selection. So here, when you are trying to properly understand the idea of sexual selection, it is driven by purpose, right? Even among animals, why would an animal choose the most vibrant one, most attractive one, most beautiful one, the bird that can sing better, right? So it means it's driven by meaning. So the very interesting statement made by Plummer, who is sociologist and who is also kind of psychologist and philosopher. So when Plummer made the statement that the distinctiveness of human beings is that every individual acts independently. So that is the distinctiveness of human beings. And then if human beings cannot act independently, then there is no distinctiveness of human beings from animals and from any materialistic things that surrounds us. Our life would be equal or equivalent to the purposeless matters. That is about life. And therefore, when we talk about meanings, determinism does not give life meaning. And therefore, if life has to be meaningful, right? Even the atheist says that life is meaningless, but they do not live the way they speak. They do not live the way they say. They say that life is meaningless, but they live as if though life is meaningful. So that's what atheists do. Even to the smallest example, we use something. Our action is driven by the meaning that the object has for us, right? Depending on how meaningful the object is for us, we do things, we take things, we buy things. So if life has to be meaningful, then there has to be concept and there has to be the existence of free will. The other argument is accountability. If free will does not exist and if our life is always determined by something, then what holds our accountability? Are human beings accountable of our actions? Suppose I kill my friend with no reason, then am I accountable of my action? If we only have to look on the deterministic side of life, then I shouldn't be accountable of my action right now. But when we are talking about accountability of life, every human beings are accountable for our own action. That is why the concept of dharma in Bhagavad Gita becomes very important. Dharma is your duty, and therefore every human being is responsible of your duty. And therefore, when you don't do your duty properly, there is a concept of karma again, right? Karma is that there is a consequences of your action. If you do good, there is a good outcome for that. But if you do bad, there is bad consequences for that. And therefore, every human beings are accountable of our actions. So that is the idea of accountability. What about mysteries? What solves mystery? Mysteries are something that we cannot really solve and understand. Really, like we cannot really understand what is that, right? And so let's say dreams. Why does dreams If everything is deterministic and can be explained and can be predicted, then why do streams? Sleep remains one of the last biological mystery. Science cannot solve that, right? Freud came up, failed. Jung came up, failed. Aristotle failed to explain dreams. Neuroscience kind of failed. So dream remains unsolved, unsolvable problem that remains one of the last biological mystery. So there are mysteries of this world, there are mysteries of our life. So what if all those mysteries exist, then determinism is just a small portion that contributes to our life. There were important questions asked in comment section, so let me quickly address those and then I'll conclude. Somebody asked, if there is always a causation for every effect, if there is always a cause for every effect, what caused the first cause? That was a very fantastic and interesting, fascinating question. Because in deterministic world, there is an infinite regression. Each cause leads to one effect, and that effect becomes a cause for another effect. So there is an endless regression, right? So things are regressed and things are replicated again and again, over and over. So there's endless, infinite number of regression. So what is the first cause? We cannot say in materialistic worldview. We have to understand the first cause, then we should bring the idea of the uncaused cost, right? The first cause should be something that is uncaused cause. And then the only uncaused cause is possible in the existence of God. If God exists only, then everything that exists or all the causation starts with something that is uncaused. So that becomes God, the creator of the universe. And then if we abide by that doctrine or if we abide by that idea, then creation account becomes reasonable. So the uncaused cause, the idea of uncaused cause can be the answer to that question. The another question was, there was a question on how do you say that luck does not exist? Come on, luck is just a concept. When you see the definition or the idea or the meaning of luck is just a chance, right? Luck is just a chance. And what is chance? Chance is just probability. Luck is just an expression of good outcome or fortune. When you are happy, you say it's a good luck. You just express your, positive emotions. That is simply luck. Human beings are deluded by the idea of luck so bad that we think that luck is the cause for good outcome. Luck is not the cause of good outcome. And then if you believe in God, then how can you believe in blessing and luck at the same time? That's contradictory, right? So I would rather choose to believe in blessing, because when we are saying that blessing, there is a source of cause, that is God. And therefore, when God is the source, everything is purposeful, and that is a blessing. But I cannot put luck as the cause for positive outcome. So that's the answer to your question. The other question was that if determinism and free will are such opposite, then is there possibility to merge them together? Can determinism and free will coexist? That was the question. The answer to that would be, there is a concept of compatibilism. So in compatibilist idea, free will and determinism coexist. Even though everything has a cost, that doesn't shatter the fact that human beings are free to make choice. Human beings are accountable of our actions. Human beings are meaning driven. And if determinism has to be completely removed, then free will becomes like, where does free will stand? What are the costs? If free will does not have cost, then what is that freedom we have? Like, it's just nothing, right? There is a vacuum. But also, if we completely remove free will and then bring up determinism, then it cuts off all the idea of meanings and values and purpose of life. So it makes no sense again. So when determinism is the ghost, the idea of all the causes, and then free will becomes a meaning, then they can merge them, like we can merge the both ideas and concepts. So that is the idea of compatibilism, that the two can coexist, that the two can coexist in unity. So that is the whole idea. So those are the important questions that I found it necessary to answer. And so that's the end of the video. It's always encouraging to see your comments and read your comments. And really, it makes lots of sense when I make video and then when there are effective comments like that. If you are finding my videos helpful and have not subscribed to my channel, then you should. So that's what I would request. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you in the next video.